Okay, if you would please go ahead and mute your video and your audio, and we'll get ready to go from there.
Dad and I were going to go over into the night at Rimmy's one night.
I'm glad to see you here, Melissa. Now, I want to just go ahead and start over here in the announcements section of Canvas, and I just want to make sure I clarify some things for everybody. I'm sure we'll have some others who will join, maybe not, you never know. But to make a long story short, you're going to see basically three types of announcements in here. One of them is going to be like this one, which is, say, for virtual office hours that I held yesterday, all right? The other is going to be, you'll usually see recording or screencast. This is a recording of a class, okay? And what I do is I take these screencasts and I convert them to YouTube videos, and then I post them on YouTube. So you'll see the YouTube video there. And then you'll see a thing called an invitation. Now, let's say you joined us today, came over here to the invitation, and that's how you join the meeting if you want to join it live, okay? And there will probably be some people who come here into the physical classroom today. Some who'll join us online. It doesn't really matter all that much. However you do it is how you do it. I want to talk some about where we are, pardon me, in terms of what's going on. So we're straight there in terms of how that all works. And I'm going to go in the modules. And we're in the first week, and we have three things that are due today. You have XLS1, which you should have already uploaded. We did that one. And that was whistle cleaners. And then case number 2, which was Athena Beauty products. And in both of those, we did a little bit of embellishing, some formatting, that type of thing. Whistle cleaners was that e-commerce case where they had a website, and we took the visitors and people who became shoppers, and shoppers who became attempted buyers, and attempted buyers who became buyers, and we did some of the work of formatting and cell referencing and that type of thing. Now, when we started the course, we had worked on the Guardian Roofing payroll case. And that was the one that I said, hey, this is an example of a really, really well done spreadsheet. And also just to let you see what employers have to pay, matching funds and all of that. So we've worked through those kinds and you should have uploaded case number 3 already. And then on Tuesday, we worked through case number 4. And that was Dabney Financial Services, and you'll remember that's the case where we had to make a decision for some clients. Should they buy CVS or Walgreens? And we went through using the name manager. We went through doing some cell referencing. We looked at the financial ratios, and we had that file. So you should have uploaded those 4 cases. You said we're working quite a ways ahead. Yes, that's true. And as I've said before, the reason is very simple. When we get to the access cases, normally what will happen is we'll slow down because folks don't have as much experience with access as they do with Excel. Now, today the two file uploads are due at, I think they're due at 5 p.m. and then the financial ratios quiz is due tonight. I think if I set it up, no, it's due at 5 p.m. Okay. That's interesting. I thought I'd set up for later than that, but I guess everybody's set for 5 p.m. today. So the financial ratios quiz, as I'd mentioned, is drawn primarily from Chapter 4 in the Solve It 6.0 textbook from that case, Dabney Financial Services. Okay. Now I have some other materials that are scattered through the web through this. Some other materials on financial ratios that are scattered through the Canvas room. Okay, and a short history of the accounting ratios. And I have some information on looking at stocks. One is big charts that gives you an idea of how to put some charts together. Then here's a NASDAQ stock comparison. Here's Google Finance Company, their comparisons. And then there's Bloomberg, there's Yahoo, there's Motley Fool. There's quite a few stock sites out there today, and I'm sure they're getting a lot of traffic because the Dow's down another 400 points or whatever. But you know, what goes up comes down, and you know, it's the bad news is the Dow's going down. The good news is, you know, if you want to pick up stocks on the cheap, it would be a good time to do it. If you're a consistent investor, that's what's going to happen. Now, let's talk about what we're doing. Again, we've got these 4 cases that we've done and we worked through, and we ended up the other day with Dabney Financial. We worked through the accounting ratios and why we use them and how they're put together. So that Dabney Financial Services starts over on page 47, and that literally will show you how to compute those financial ratios and why they're important. Okay, this is a case in business problem analysis. So we've moved a little. In the first couple of cases, we messed around some with just navigating and refreshing ourselves on Excel, and now we're working on some specific problems. Case number 3 was putting together a payroll ledger. Case number 4 was working with accounting ratios and trying to make some sense out of them. And now we're going to move even a little bit further into a case, the town of Clintwood, which gets us involved in working with a budgeting and doing a little bit of trend analysis, or pardon me, or a little extrapolation. Now, let's go into the files, okay? And let's try and do a quick search for Clintwood. Okay, and those of you coming in late, don't worry about it. You can always go back and catch up. There's nothing there. Let's try XLS5. Okay, that doesn't, nothing there. Now let's just go down here and we'll just do a visual search. Now, I'm glad I did it because this gives me an occasion to show you a couple of zip files. Now, as you go through this course, you're going to see the Solvit 6.0 solution files and the Solvit 6.0 student files. When I refer to the skeleton files, I'm talking about the student files. But the solution files, while they're okay, often don't have a lot of the bells and whistles or some of the techniques that I feel like you ought to have. So that's why I like to do these and say, okay, upload what I've done here, what we've done together in the class, or if you want, try and work on one of them on your own. I don't care. Just don't, as long as you don't miss class, you don't miss the video, you're on top of everything. Now, I'm going to move on down here, and I had one here. This is the one that I wanted to show you, and this is called XLSX Case 5. Use this one, okay? And that's the file we're going to work with today. So let's go ahead and open that file, and let's download the file. Okay. And we're going to also do a little bit of work in terms of decision making and all this business. Now, page 54 is where the case starts, and for this to make a lot of sense, or if you get the most value, you always ought to have your textbook with you, because if you don't, you're going to miss a lot of the information that relates back to what's going on in the spreadsheet, what we're doing. Okay, now I'm going to enable the editing on this. Now I'm going to do something very, very important. I'm going to save this file to the desktop, or if you're working on another, whatever device you're working on. And the reason being is that this file, and I'm going to save it on my desktop, is because this file right now, until you save it to your desktop or native environment, it's basically like an image file. It's not the real thing, and you'll have some problems with it. So I'm going to put this, save this. You can name it what you want. I'm going to save it to the desktop. Okay. Then I'm going to close it off, and then I'm going to go back down on my desktop. Excuse me. Make sure that it's there. Okay, and find it. There it is, my little friend. And then I'm going to open it up. So the file name is XLS case 5. Use this one. And I've got one little bit of a kind of a challenge in there for you. This file uses a frozen row concept in order to enable us to see the budget and roll through it and keep the assumptions part up top. Now, as usual in these cases, what we'll see is that the first page, they'll give us the problem, some of the management skills that are involved, and then the file, okay? And then they'll start to give us some background about the organization. In this case, we're dealing with a town or a public entity, okay? And so they're gonna walk us through some background, and then at the middle of page 55, you're gonna see a paragraph. Now these are like word problems, okay? Every one of these cases really are. They'll give you bits and pieces of data, and then they'll say, okay, information, and they'll say, okay, here are some tasks to do. Sometimes they'll have some additional tasks like this one, okay? Now I like to walk you through the process with a fairly well-finished product, so we save a lot of time of inputting data and messing around with things and really focusing upon understanding what we're trying to do. Now, if you take a look at the file there, you're going to see it has all the elements that we should have in a well-designed spreadsheet. It has the title area, okay? Then it has this documentation, okay? And then it has an assumptions area. And then it has a computation and output area. And then here at the bottom of this, I've used conditional formatting to give us a cue in terms of of how this budget looks. Now, when we look at a budget, okay, this is what we would call a pro forma, P-R-O space F-O-R-M-A, a Latin word which means for the sake of or a form for a particular use. What we're doing is we're taking data from the organization and we're putting it into a format that we can use it like a tool. And what we're trying to do here is to say, okay, here's my base budget for 2008. And then given some assumptions, what will it look like in 2009? And what will it look like in 2010? Now, later on down the course, you're going to have an exam, a quiz on trend analysis. So you want to pay special attention to this case, as well as some of the materials I've got scattered through the Canvas website. So we're going to do a little bit of that, okay? So we have the assumptions area, and the assumptions are drawn from what's here in chapter 55. Now, page 55. And let's talk about kind of navigating through this budget. When public entities or governmental entities use some different terminology than businesses do. The term disbursement means what I've paid out. I've dispersed the money, okay? They don't use accrual accounting. They use basically what we call checkbook accounting, which is I spend it and I don't count it as spent until I've spent it, okay? So when you hear people talk about the federal budget, remember and understand that budget is not the same as a company's budget. It uses a textbook approach, and you'll see there the term disbursements. Revenues, that's pretty easy. Those are the funds that come in, and this town, as you can see, has got three kinds of revenue. Tax levy, it gets aid from the state, and then what are called miscellaneous receipts. And at the very bottom, you see receipts less disbursements, okay? So take what came in, okay, in terms of the receipts, the revenues, less the disbursements, and that gives us our balance. Now, theoretically, ideally, we should spend as much as we take in. We shouldn't spend more than we take in. But now, if you're a national government and you can print your own money, best of luck, or if you're a national government and you have friends in your neighborhood, other governments who will loan you money, best of luck. Okay, so if you're a city government or a state government or a county government, you don't have that luxury. All right, so ideally you want to spend as much as you bring in. If you spend less than what you brought in, okay, unless there's a good reason for it, you ought to return it to everybody who paid in. Now, this creates some dilemmas, okay, and just one of the unfortunate things here is we don't give you a course, make you take a course in public finance or public budgeting, so there's a lot of misunderstanding in the general public, especially business people, about how that all works. And so, clarify some terms. There's a difference between, okay, deficit and a debt. And you'll hear people get confused that even you listen to people there in Washington and they'll confuse it too. A deficit means during some fiscal period I spent more than I brought in. A debt means I borrowed money, okay? That's a whole different critter. And as we saw, we can look at indebtedness and we have some ways and ratios to take a look at it. And so when you hear people talk about the national debt, the debt of the United States, all right, always you want to go find out, well, who do we owe the money to? Okay? If you hear people talking about the deficit, what that technically should mean is how we spent more than we brought in. Okay? Now, there have been a few occasions where we've brought in more money than we spent. And Congress wisely figured out a way to spend it rather than pay down Social Security or pay down on any other kinds of expenses that are there. They just said, well, we got some more to spend, let's spend it. Okay? And that's one of the moral hazards that gets involved when you're trying to be a legislator or you're dealing with budgets. All of that being said, now we're going to do a little bit of work, and let's look here for a moment and we'll see some of the assumptions, okay? And one of the assumptions there in this page 55 in the middle, that middle paragraph, the state aid is going to reduce, the state's going to reduce its aid by 6% a year. So if you look at cell G3, you're going to see the output. And then if you look up into the formula bar, you'll see what I did. 1 minus 0.06. Okay, now that's really the best way to do this so that you know, okay, that you're working with increments and decrements. You say, what are you talking about? What I'm talking about is pretty simply is increases or decreases. So we're assuming that the state aid is going to go down 6% a year, and that's where I got that 0.94. But if you look in the formula bar, I used 1 minus 0.06. Okay, now, and the employee's salary and benefits, we'll take a look there. And I have a little bit different figure there, but I'll show you how we got there in a minute. And they say historically, expenditures for employee salaries and benefits have been rising 13% annually. So over here, this should be 1 plus 0.13. Okay? And we're just taking this back to the base assumptions. And then over in G5, where we're going to sell G5, we're going to be working with all other expenses, and there's an assumption, okay, that all other expenses will rise at a rate of 6% a year. So I'm going to go in here and just change the 5 to a 6. Okay. Tax levy, we had promised the public we're not going to raise it any more than 4%, so that would be 1 plus 0.04. And then miscellaneous receipts rise 5% annually. So we're going to change that to 1 plus 0.05. If you're wondering where we're at, we're on page 55, Town of Clinton, in the middle paragraph of page 55 in the Solve It book. Now, what I've done now is I've utilized all the things that we were told to assume about the budget. And let's just go through it again. We're assuming that the state aid is going to go down 6% a year. Okay, so every year we're going to have 94% of what we had the year before. They're assuming that employees' salary and benefits will go up 13%. So every year it's going to go up 13%. All other expenses, 6%. The tax levy, that's going to go up 4%, and the miscellaneous receipts will go up 5%. Make sure I got that right. Yep. Okay. Now let's look down here at row 40, and this will tell us where we are given our current assumptions. Okay, if these assumptions hold true and we don't take any action, then we end up with deficits. And with deficit in 2009, okay, is $248,000. Then it starts to grow in 2010 to 368. So we have to address this issue. Okay. Again, if we can't print money or we don't have unlimited borrowing capacity, we got trouble. Now, if we're like the state of Illinois, we'll do the right thing. Here's the right thing. We borrow all the money from the state employees' pension funds and then proceed to not pay it back. But they don't need a pension, do they? State of Oklahoma, thankfully, has not done that yet. I say yet because a lot of states have tapped into their employee retirement funds. Okay. A tip when you go to work for somebody and they tell you about the retirement program, okay, make sure that it's what they call portable. Portable means you take it with you, okay? So if you leave the organization, it's yours. Many places, and this is particularly back in the middle of the 20th century, large industries would hire people and give them employee and have retirement benefits set aside. But if the employee didn't stay invest up to the point where they could retire, when they left, it stayed with the employer. Okay, and in the late 1970s, early 1980s, there were some people that were called corporate raiders, and what they liked to do was go after a company and get its stock. So they didn't care about the company. They wanted the pension funds. They wanted the cash that accumulated there. So a lot of people ended up with not much. So you have to be careful about that one. Okay, so now we need to take some action. And of course, as I've said before, we use all of this technology in order to take the data and create information. That is something I can make a decision with. All right, so I'm going to click Insert. And I'm going to create I'm going to put in a text box, and I'm going to write down my options. Well, one of them is to increase revenue. Increase revenue to make up the shortfall. Okay. The second, and then we'll keep expenditures okay. The second thing is we can keep revenue fixed. We can keep the revenue the same. And then as you would expect, we can reduce expenses. Okay? Everybody with me so far? The third is some combination of options 1 and 2. Now, just to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to go ahead and highlight those and make them a larger size font. Okay. Right now, is there as Congress is debating this spending bill that they're going through, they're proposing expenditures for things, okay, but they're not proposing ways to pay for those things. So it's great to say, let's give Puerto Rico $50 billion to rebuild. When someone asks the question, where will the money come from? There's a very empty silence from those usually vocal 460 some odd people who represent you and me. Okay? Show. That's one of the reasons why I say again that it's a shame we don't give you a public budgeting course or public finance courses so you understand some of this. The public gets all confused about this, and the people up there, as they say, keep kicking the can down the road. And that's just when would we hit the magic point where our continued spending becomes an issue? I don't know, and here's the reason. The problem is that the thing that scares everybody is the main thing is being able to pay the interest on our debt. Okay? If you default by not paying, you're in big trouble. If the United States defaults on its debts, that's not good. That's not good for the whole world, because so many countries around the world and businesses around the world own United States securities, Treasury securities. They own them for a simple reason. We are the safest haven to put money. People use a term, it's a safe haven, it's a safe harbor. Why? Well, we don't have a coup d'etat every 5 years. The government doesn't nationalize all the industries. We have a transparent legal system so that if you buy stocks, you actually do own something. And if somebody disappears with the money, we try to find them, all those kinds of things. Shareholders have redress. So it's a good place to put your money, okay? And everybody likes the United States because we are a fine place to do that. But if the point comes you can't service your debt, you can't pay the interest on the debt, that's not good. That's when things become really, really, really problematic, okay? So this is a useful exercise to look at management problems, but also very timely for you in terms of understanding, okay, how all this stuff works and how it impacts you, okay? And those you'll want to look at those kinds of things because there are lots of theories out there about how this all should work. You know, and I can argue both sides of the equation. Who knows? You know, all that we know is this: is that the one thing that makes this country the greatest in the world is this thing called opportunity, where people can start their own business. And in fact, in the past 15 years, most of our job growth has come from companies with fewer than 100 employees, which ought to be food for thought. And the greatest share of those have been women. So thank you, ladies, for keeping us employed. We need you to do more. Okay, now that being said, I've got my three options here: increase the revenue and keep the expenditures the same, keep the revenue the same and reduce expenses, because I'm assuming I want to be in balance, or some combination of number one and number two. Okay, now let's look at one of our good old our friends that we have, and that's called the name manager. So click on formulas and then click on the name manager, and you'll see that we have those assumption cells. We've given them a name. And then also down there on the receipts less disbursements in 2009, 2008. So we've used the name manager, okay, to define some cells. Okay? So we know what values in there and all that. Now we can take a look at another friend if we want to, all right? And that's a tool if we want to, and that's called the scenario manager. Now click back on home, and then click on data. And if you come over, you'll see a thing called what if analysis. All right, we're going to click on it, and you'll see a thing called the scenario manager. Now I want you to click on that. The scenario manager is a tool that allows us to take a set of variables or cells and assign a value to them, save it, and then see what everything looks like with those. So we can do what we call scenario analysis, and we can create a base scenario, that is what we assume. We could do a worst case, best case, medium case. You've heard those kinds of terms before. And we use the scenario manager to say, okay, how will things look like if we do X, Y, or Z? So we're going to do this. First of all, we're going to click Add. And then this is going to be called Base Case. Okay? And it'll be changing cells. It'll be G3 through G7. Then click OK. Click OK again. And now you'll see each of these values. Okay? So the state aid, 0.94. Employee salary benefits, 1.13. Everybody see where we are? Okay? Now, I've named this the base case because these are our starting assumptions. When we do trend analysis, okay, or we extrapolate figures, we start from some point in time. And at this point, we're at 2008, okay? So we're going to click OK. All right. Now, here's an interesting little factoid just following back because it relates to this case. The Secretary of Defense yesterday said we need to really up our spending on military budget. We need to increase it massively. Okay? And then people got all up in arms. Well, back in the 1980s, the United States government almost tripled its defense budget. And people kept going, why do they keep putting more money in defense? And it's a pretty simple equation. The United States economy is so robust, so strong, so huge that those increases in the military budget were not that big of an impact on our GDP. In fact, they contributed positively to our GDP because when you open an air base, you got people working there, you've got the city that surrounds it, on and on and on. You can go look at Tinker Field, or you go to San Diego if you really want to see that. And so what happened is we'd spend, but we got that money back in terms of expenditures of all kinds of supporting those people. At the same time, our adversary in the world, the Soviets, who just happened to be primarily Russians, this sound familiar, decided they needed to do the same thing. Unfortunately for them, they had a planned quote-unquote economy, and we bankrupted them. So rather than, we didn't fire one missile, we didn't invade them, we did it the American way. We did a hostile takeover. Okay, now they're back, and they've said, and they create a whole bunch of capital. They have a bunch of billionaires who kowtow to Mr. Putin, and they give him all the money he wants, and they increase their budgets. But he's been smart because he said, now I can conduct warfare in a very different way. Why build a submarine when I can take 300 people who can hack into a computer system and really mess with somebody's infrastructure? Oh, that's changed everything. Okay. But for those who think that they have to match us, they're going to have a problem doing that. Nonetheless, we have our base case scenario. And so if we want to see the results of it, we click Show. Everybody with me so far? This is a very nice, convenient tool. And you say, well, okay, Dr. Harmon, where do we go from here? Well, we know our base scenario. We know the outcomes. Okay, so now we need to do some decision making. Now, if we increase revenue, we're going to upset everybody because we told them we were going to keep revenue at 4% and no more, a 4% jump every year in terms of our tax levy. We said miscellaneous receipts and traffic tickets, stuff like that, would stay at about a 5% a year growth rate. So if we increase the revenue and keep expenditures the same, we can balance the budget, but we're going to make people angry because they're going to say, wait a minute, I'm paying more for the same amount of service. Okay? So that's not probably going to be tenable. We could keep the revenue the same, but we could reduce the expenses. Now that's a very enticing thing. But today or the next time you drive on Interstate 40 and you go into Oklahoma City and you feel like your teeth are about to be rattled out of your head, remember that somebody about 10 years ago said, well, why don't we just forego spending on fixing that road because, well, you know, someone else will handle that problem for us. Or if you can't get emergency management service, or you don't have enough beds for dangerous criminals, or you don't have enough cops in the street, or your water treatment plants. I could go on and on. Okay, so that's probably not a good alternative, although it's one that a lot of folks like. Okay, people don't get concerned about things like environmental pollution until they look down in the creek and it looks like their washing machine water. Or people start getting sick, or people within 100 yards of some stream have a cancer rate 1,000 times higher than normal. Then we get concerned. Probably too late. It's just the same thing when they had the Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. People said, everybody had been telling the people in New Orleans for years, the government there, you need to do some stuff to fix this because you're going to have a problem. We will later. Well, later came. What can I say? And one of the problems was man-made. That is, they kept building and expanding the city into areas that were really actually flood areas. They were building at below sea level, about 6 inches to a foot in some places. Manhattan has some of the same problems. And, you know, when you get a storm surge, bad stuff happens. Okay, now, a good manager probably is going to say, well, why don't we try some combination, okay, of 1 and 2? Makes sense? Of course. And we're paid to be decision makers, and we're paid to think our way through. So we can try to tinker with this a little bit. Now, our 2008 situation looks good, but we got to deal with 2009 and 2010. So we're going to try some things with this. First of all, we're going to ask ourselves another question. Which of these factors do I control? Okay? I don't control state aid. That comes from them. Okay? Do I control miscellaneous receipts? Yeah. All other expenses? Yeah. I control those. Now you'll see, and let's go down here to row 37, the debt service. Okay? You see that it's the same figure across the board because the debt service remains fixed. It's the interest you paid on money you borrowed. Okay? So it's all right. Well, let's see what we can do. The next question is, what's the 800-pound gorilla in the room? And that's why when we have an assumptions area created like this, when we're doing a trend analysis, that we can spot it immediately. And you, as I would guess, you probably have just taken a look at this and said, whoa, 13% a year. Okay? That's a large amount. And if you go down and start to look at the disbursements, salaries plus benefits, you see that's a big chunk of the budget. That is the 800-pound gorilla that I need to do something about. Okay? So I want to say, okay, I'm going to try to find a way to reduce those. And it's at 13%. Okay? So I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to take it down to 10%, and say we want to keep it at 10%. And we'll click enter, and let's see what happens. Well, we've got it wrestled down a little bit. Okay, in terms of where we were, and you said, well, how well have we done? Well, we can go back up here into the formulas, and pardon me, yeah, we can go into the data, and we can click the what if analysis scenario manager. And we could say, okay, let me see what it looked like with the base case if we just do nothing. Oh, this looks a little better. So we've started one thing, and we'll keep a note of that, and that is let's try to keep those expenses down. Now, instead of 10%, let's say we're gonna cut them in the growth of them, okay, basically in half. So I'm going to keep the employee salary and benefits at let's call it 7%, and let's see what happens. Yeah, we're getting close. Made a little progress. Okay. Now at the same time, we could say, all right, we're gonna cut some of this a little bit. So what about our tax levy? Well, we could go to the public and say, look, you know, we need to raise the revenues a little bit, and so we're going to do that. Okay, and I'm going to make that. Let's make that 6%, and see what happens. Look where we are now. We're at balance in 2008. In 2009, okay, we are at a little bit of a surplus, and then in 2010 we're at a pretty small deficit. Okay, so let's go back into our friend the scenario manager and click on formulas. Pardon me, go back to data, I apologize, and go to the what if analysis and click on scenario manager. And we're going to add a scenario, and this is, we're going to say scenario 1, okay? And we're going to change the cells G3 to G7. Now, if I want to, here in the comments, I can put in the comment box, I can put the stuff I'm going to change. It's already in there anyway. Well, let's go ahead and click OK. And now we have this new scenario 1. We'll click OK. Everybody with me so far? So I have that scenario saved. So let's click Show. And there we are. Then let's go back up to the base case and see what kind of progress we've made. And we've made a lot by doing this. Or we may want to try one more final little scenario if we so choose, okay, or a couple of more, and we could just keep tweaking this thing as we move along. Well, let's do that. Let's look at all other expenses, and let's say we're going to try to keep them down to 4%. Let's see what that does. Okay. Now, we're also going to go ahead and on the tax levy, instead of 1.06, we're going to do 1.065. So it'll be a 6.5% increase. All right. And then on miscellaneous receipts, we're going to bump that up to 1.075. Okay, and let's see what that does for us. And it starts to get us, and then we're back to the gorilla, and we're going to come back here, and we're going to come back to, and we're going to take that down to 1.09. Now let's see what happens. Nicely done. Now we've got surpluses. Okay, and we have a balanced budget. We have a surplus in 2009. We have a surplus in 2010. And we're okay there because we could say, well, we've got some wiggle room here if we want to reduce that tax levy back down for 2011 or create a rainy day fund. Okay. So if we have a fiscal crisis, we've got a pool of money we can pull in, like a savings account. So I'm going to click on what if analysis. Okay. And I'm going to click Add, and I'm going to call this Scenario 2. Okay? And there are the figures. And we'll click OK. And then we'll click Show. Now, Now we can see, if we want to, the various scenarios. So I'm gonna close this, and then I'm gonna come back up to what if analysis, and I'm gonna click Scenario Manager. I'm gonna click Base Case, and I'm gonna click Show. Okay. Now I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna to do a print screen. Okay. So I'm gonna click on Function, Print Screen, and then I'm gonna bury this into a Word doc. Maybe I'm going to do a report, something like that. Okay. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to run scenario 1. All I have to do is click Show, and it'll show me what I've got. I can do this print screen again. And if I wanted to, I could even say, okay, here's how things improve. But I have the conditional formatting that tells the story. Because I can look at the white, green, and red, and I can tell I've gone from balance to a surplus to a negative. So if I have the surplus in 08, in 2009, I can apply it to 2010 if I need to. Everybody with me so far? What we're doing? Simple little thing I could do for a reporting thing. Or if I was in a meeting, I could do this and use the Scenario Manager and go through it on the fly. Okay, to let everybody see what we're looking at. Let's click back here on, we'll close this, and then we'll come back, and we're going to look at scenario number 2. Okay, and we'll click Show, and then we'll do the print screen again. And I could add whatever narrative I wanted to add or anything like that. Okay. And what I would do, just, if I were going to provide this, to send this to somebody, say, okay, here's how things look like at this point. I would use these and then surround them with some verbiage, okay? Because clearly, but I want to make sure that I have good visual acuity on this for the end user. So I'm going to click Page Layout, and I'll go ahead and put it into a landscape orientation, okay? And then say, all right, now, increase it out to what makes sense to you. Okay. Everybody with me? Now, one of the nice things about this tool is that and I'll close this, and I'm just going to take it back to the base scenario now. But always make sure you start with your first set of assumptions, the base case, and labeled as such, okay? And then you just go on through there. And you can see, in fact, in the comments down here where we've made some changes, I was kind of lazy, but let's look at base case, we'll show it, okay? And then we're going to look at scenario 1, and we'll show it, all right? And down here in the comments area, okay, if I want to edit it, I can add the comments and say, okay, here are the changes I made for scenario 1, the changes I made for scenario 2. And I could create as many of these as would make sense to me. Scenario 2 doesn't look very bad. Because I've got surpluses in each of those 2 years. Okay. Now, the assumption area also is intended, the assumption area also is intended to help me stay focused, okay, on where the problems lie. And I'm going to come back here to the what if analysis. And I'm going to do scenario manager. I'm going to click base case. All right. Now, in this problem, like it is in most budgeting problems, if I'm doing a one-time budget, that's one thing. Most of the time, budgets are going to be multi-period. There might be several months, for a year, who knows. These are annual budgets. I'm always wanting to look at, where am I going to have some problems? Or what's the point that's the most sensitive? Okay, and typically that's where things are going or things are growing faster than anything in terms of increments, or where things are decreasing, i.e. decrements, or if they have a big share or proportion of the whole budget. And in terms of the risk that's laden with this budget, let's look at this for just a moment. We have these salaries plus benefits, okay? And let's find out what percentage they are of the total budget. And I'm just going to start, okay, with the 2008 budget, and I'm going to highlight cells B21 through B26, and I know that comes up with 104,000. That's not right, because I should have far more than that. I probably missed the police. That's weird. Why am I getting this? B21 to B26. That makes no sense. Let's try something here. And I'm going to go back over to home. Let me see the auto sum. Okay. Now it's 230. Oh, okay. What did I do with this? Well, let's just back out of here for a minute. But we know it's, and I'll just write this down here real quickly. It's 2238. And so it's pretty simple. I can figure out the percentage at that point of the entire budget. All right. And I'll take this out. And we're back to where we were. But we know at 2 million, okay, out of, we know, okay, put it in perspective. We're looking at $2 million in terms of salaries and benefits, and the total receipts, okay, are 5.1. So salaries and benefits are almost 50% of our budget. And that's pretty much in line with what you'll see with most government entities, and it's fairly well in line with what you'll see with most companies. Although in private sector, some firms, knowledge-based firms, the salary benefits will be as much as 65 or 70%. Okay, so that's pretty much, you know, what would be a good start with this. The assumptions area, developing the scenarios, looking at your choices in terms of what you've got going on, you know, increasing the revenue, keep one factor the same, and do increments or decrements on another, or some combination of them. So you would end up, and we used conditional formatting here, and so if it's below 0, then it gives us this red shade with red letters. If it's above 0, below 0, if it's above it, it gives us green. If it's not, it does nothing. Okay, and that's pretty much what we're doing there. Now, just in terms of understanding, when we do a forecast, we always take the base period, okay, plus the increment. You say, what are you talking about? Well, let's look at this right here. Okay. Now, when I put in the scenario manager, that converted those just to straight numbers. Here we are. 1 plus 0.0. Pardon me. 1. It was supposed to decrease. 1 minus 0.06. Okay. And so that the formula bar reveals what's going on and in terms of what we see in the display. Now, when we did the scenario manager, it converted those these cells that had formulas into just regular numbers. And it was giving us that warning. Okay. And that's pretty much all that we needed to know there in terms of how things were working out. Now, I think we started about 10 minutes or so early, and let's see. Now, go ahead and make sure that you have your work saved, and then upload it over into, this would be case number 5. So where it says over here upload XLS5 here, that's where you want to put it. So let me scroll through here. I'll go to the modules. It's going to be quicker to go to the syllabus section. Okay, and we'll find XLS5 here. Upload XLS5 right here. Okay. Now, again, we're ahead in the game, but when we hit access, it'll slow itself down. So we're building ourselves some flex time to be able to deal with those. I'm not sure what else I feel like we need to cover when we go back to Tuesday. Okay, that's going to be a screencast. And if you want to kind of see, what the highlight ahead, it's the screencast. We're going to work on spreadsheet case number 6. That's over on page 57 over there in the Solve It workbook. I'd like you to take a look at it because Badger Jams, we're going to develop a break-even model, okay? And we're going to do some break-even analysis and talk about that and what that implies and how we visually depict it. And I think you'd agree, if I'm looking at this, it's pretty easy to see I look good today, tomorrow, and the next year don't look so great. So I use the coloration there and that conditional formatting to alert, folks, hey, not good. Now, when we have surpluses, we had greens there, of course. So case number 6. Now, if you want to kind of get started, obviously it's on page 57. And I've got some materials in the website that cover break-even analysis. All right, but let's just go over to the files for a second. And I think I've got 2 or 3. As you can see, I kind of work through these and I improve them or embellish them as I work along. Okay, and what looks good to me and what doesn't, and so forth. So a good place to start, and this is going to be Badger Jams. Let's see if I've got an XLS6 here. And there it is, XLS6 Badger Jams. That's one you could take a look at because it's probably the one I'll look at or work with. And you can see, for example, I have XLS7 BISS, that type of thing. So I'd like you to take a look at Badger Jams and take a look at that case there. Page 57, they talk about break-even analysis and how we get that done. Now, one other thing, let's go back to the modules for a minute. I think as we get into that week, I have some, this is what I wanted to show you. Okay. Here's some resources related to today's case. A budget versus a forecast versus a projection versus a performance explains what each of those are. U.S. government spending, understanding the differences between debt and a deficit. What does a trade deficit mean? And then a link I'd like you to see, what is Keynesian economics? And an interesting, what's been the predominant viewpoint in Western governments, Western countries, they've used Keynesian economics as a means to deal with their economies, as they've all, like us, set up a central bank and tried to control the money flow or money supply and all that business. Now I want to go back up to the one module here. And if you go to the supplemental website, or even here, you'll find some materials on break-even analysis. And we're going to look at break-even analysis in terms of break-even revenues, and then at break-even units, and talk about the entrepreneur's risk and what we call the economic risk that's involved, and see how much courage it takes to start your own business. Well, folks, thank you so much, and I think we've done enough for today. I will see all of you online on Tuesday, and once I've finished this recording, I'll post it over there in YouTube. Thank you so much. And I see it looks like I've got a question there. Let me see if I can try to answer it. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording here.